Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Up in the Air. I'm Meredith Fish.
And I'm Dakota Smith. We hope everyone is staying warm, as it appears Ryan was right last week about the climate outlook. It sure is cold out there.
That's right, Dakota. And Ryan will be at it again with a look at what next week has in store.
Looking forward to it. My bet is cold. We'll also have Christy Shields from our TV production class on the show tonight. She'll be looking into how clothing stores sales change due to the weather.
And with Groundhog's Day 2 weeks away, a student from our meteorology communications brings us a report on whether or not animal folklore related to weather is true.
But first, let's get into all the climate science and weather enterprise news with Update in the Air. Recently, the satellite TV provider DirecTV has cut the Weather Channel from its programming. Last Monday, the contract between the two companies ended, and a new deal was not reached due to financial disagreements. This breakup has affected nearly 20 million DirecTV customers who regularly tune in to get their weather fix. The Weather Channel has stated that the removal of its network puts people's lives at risk due to the lack of weather information the general public can access. In response, DirecTV has programmed a new network called Weather Nation. Weather Nation was in a similar position in 2008 when they replaced the Weather Channel for 4 days when there was a contract dispute between the Weather Channel and Dish Network. The current dispute has lasted over a week, and there is no word on the negotiations between the two companies.
Recent wildfires in Southern California are 78% contained as of midday Sunday. The fire has affected 3 square miles of the area starting in the Angeles National Forest. With dry conditions still occurring, the Forest Service is reminding residents to be careful, and it'll probably be at least another 3 days until the entire fire is contained. This outburst was started from a carelessly set campfire and has destroyed more than 1,800 acres, leaving 2 people hurt and 5 homes destroyed.
In a report by the Energy Information Administration, it has been projected that national carbon dioxide emissions related to energy use will show an increase in 2013 compared to 2012. Carbon dioxide emissions are expected to increase by 2% to a total of 5.37 billion tons. This is the first year since 2010 that we've had such an increasing trend. In recent years, we've seen a decrease in such emissions due to an increased use of natural gas as compared to coal as an energy source. However, increasing natural gas prices last year have led to a leveling off in its use and an increased coal usage. This trend is expected to be short-lived as power plants are anticipated to continue using more and more natural gas. Overall, the Energy Information Administration expects CO2 emissions due to energy to remain relatively the same for the next few years.
A coal cleaning chemical spilled into a river in Charleston, West Virginia, leaving 300,000 people without water. Usually spills of this nature occur more discreetly, ruining private wells or streams, and attract much less media attention. With this spill affecting so many, researchers at Duke University have been studying the discharges from power plants, saying that cleaner coal, perhaps a more cleaner environment, but dirtier water. The water quality monitoring sites in mining areas are so inadequate that health violations are not likely caught. Overall, power plants have contributed to the ruin of 399 bodies of drinking water sources.
Last week we mentioned the heat and wildfires that have consumed Australia for the year 2013. Since then, the country's most populous state, New South Wales, has seen over 90 fires sparked by lightning strikes. In the neighboring state of Victoria, over 60 fires are currently burning, with over 320,000 acres scorched. Although mainly lit by lightning, 12 of the fires have reportedly been lit intentionally. Fortunately, the fires are expected to subdue in the upcoming days as the heat wave and freezing conditions are forecasted to calm down.
Bad weather and poor policies are likely to affect the maize harvest, leading to a shortage throughout Kenya. Flash flooding affected crop production, and the first harvest is projected to be 10 million bags short. The shortage of fertilizer was also a major hindrance to the maize production. And with elections coinciding with planting season, the fertilizer distribution by the government was delayed. The crop is anticipated to decline in yield even further as the year goes on. With consumption on this crop also increasing, the demand pushes for more bags than available.
Welcome back to Up in the Air. As the weather changes from season to season, so does our clothing.
That's why Christy Shields from our TV production class will explore the sales fluctuations of the clothing market in this week's feature.
Clothes aren't only good for fashion, we've been wearing them for centuries to keep us protected from different types of weather. I recently went to the Nittany Mall and sat down with the general manager at the Gap to talk to her about how climate and weather can affect the store. For customers to come to a mall, temperature plays a big role.
If it's extremely hot or extremely cold, customers tend not to come.
Large international companies need to factor in climate when providing clothes to a consumer, such as the difference between Pennsylvania's climate and Florida's.
To some degree, yes. There are not a lot of huge differences, but Florida stores may carry a short or two year-round, whereas we do not.
I asked if the holiday season was factored out. When do most consumers come to shop? The surprising answer doesn't really have much to do with climate or weather.
Fall, back to school.
Weather and climate might not play a big role in when people like to shop. However, State College does have a harsh winter climate, which makes it difficult for employees to sometimes get to work.
Snow plays a big role, ice as well. Students driving, not being used to being in the snow is a big factor because our students come from all over the world really, so they may not have experienced driving in the snow previously, and sometimes if it's just flurries, people won't come to work.
In recent years, the only time the store was closed due to a weather event was during Superstorm Sandy.
Last year, Hurricane Sandy closed us down for an evening because we were predicted to get a lot of rain and flooding and whatnot.
Superstorm Sandy might not have brought much rain, but this summer State College did experience some flooding which led to leaky roofs.
We have had numerous leaks in our roof from when we get like really heavy torrential downpours, like the sideways rain. Because we have a seam across our roof that tends to cause leaks no matter what we do to fix it.
We learned that weather really can play a role here in State College and even affect employees getting to work. For Up in the Air, I'm Christy Shields.
Thanks very much, Dakota and Meredith. You're absolutely right. The major story going forward is going to be the cold weather, and we told you about that last week here on Up in the Air, and not much has changed going through the rest of the month, and even the beginning of February, we could be in quite a chilly pattern. So let's first start with a look at the snow depth around a lot of the country. I imagine that going forward, we will be adding to this, but as of Monday evening, January 20th, you can see that over the past week, parts of southern New England has seen some snow, and similar story here in Pennsylvania. We saw a bit of snow in State College as well. The major snow cover at this time continues to be through the northern part of the Midwest into the high plains and also through the Rockies here. You can see that here on our current snow cover. In terms of California, they really could use precipitation and they haven't had any. And an extreme drought is ongoing out there, and there are major issues because they rely on that snowpack to then melt for water as we head into the spring. So the hope is that California sees some rain or snow, but at this point, not much is in the forecast. So the 8 to 14 day outlook for next week, January 28th through February 3rd, the major player here is going to be the cold weather continuing here throughout much of the eastern United States. We are likely to be much below normal here in Pennsylvania during that period as well after a very cold week this week as well. In terms of the western part of the nation, much above normal temperatures here through the Four Corners and into California, and there really is no relief in terms of the precipitation. Below normal precipitation through the southeast, similar story out west, and there are some signals here that we may begin to get some storm development along the coastline, and if that were to occur, we would be dealing with normal to above normal precipitation here in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. Now that is the climate outlook for this week. Coming up next week on Up in the Air, we'll take a look back at the year 2013 and weather extremes in the United States.
When you take a look at Mars, you probably wouldn't think that it looks like a very nice place to live. It's dry, it's dusty, and there's practically no atmosphere. But some scientists think that Mars may have once looked like a much nicer place to live, with a thicker atmosphere, cloudy skies, and possibly even liquid water flowing over the surface. So how do you go from something like this to something like this? NASA's MAVEN spacecraft will give us a clearer idea of how Mars lost its atmosphere, and scientists think that several processes have had an impact. One of these processes is called sputtering, where atoms are knocked away from the atmosphere due to impacts from energetic particles. In our solar system, the sun constantly emits high-energy photons. When one of these photons enters the atmosphere of a planet, it can crash into a molecule, knocking loose an electron and turning it into an ion. Ions by themselves don't do much, but when a magnetic field is nearby, they'll spin around the field. Conveniently, the sun generates a giant magnetic field that is carried by the solar wind. As the magnetic field sweeps past the planet, some ions will get carried away. Other ions, depending on where they form, won't get carried away but will hit the top of the atmosphere. These ions can then crash into other molecules and fling atoms everywhere like a cue ball in a game of pool. Some of these atoms can be knocked, or sputtered, into space, causing atmospheric loss. And over billions of years, this could have caused quite a bit of change, especially since the solar wind may have been more intense early in our solar system's history. Scientists think that all of this may have caused Mars to gradually transform from what may have been a very nice place to live into the dry, dusty world we know today. And MAVEN will study this process and tell us how it really works.
Thanks for staying with us on Up in the Air.
Our final feature tonight examines the forecasting skills of everyday animals.
Punxsutawney Phil. You've heard the name and you know that weather forecasting is his game. But did you know that there are other animal meteorologists out there that are also thought to be able to predict the weather? Caterpillars, crickets, birds, and cows are all thought to lend meteorological advice. But should we believe them? Let's take a look. The woolly bear caterpillar is a popular meteorologist. An old proverb suggests that if the width of its reddish-brown stripe is wider than usual, the coming winter will be warmer than average and vice versa. This has actually not been proven true, and there is no correlation between the stripe's width and the severity of the coming winter. This guy's a phony. How about the old proverb that crickets can predict the temperature? This is actually true. If you count the number of chirps you hear in 13 seconds and add 40, you can determine the temperature within a few degrees. Now there's also a saying that if birds fly low, expect rain and a blow. This is also true. Birds can sense small decreases in air pressure that often are associated with impending storms. This sense allows birds to navigate towards the surface to the prime flying altitude where air is thin. And lastly, many people think that when cows are lying down, rain is likely soon. This is actually fiction. There is no scientific evidence that supports this claim. So some animals are better at predicting the weather than others. Although some animals might not have a drop of weather knowledge in them, they'll probably still keep their jobs.
Well, Meredith, it looks like animals are better forecasters than we thought.
That sure is surprising. We'd like to thank all the students who contributed to this episode.
Absolutely, and be sure to join us next week for more updates in the weather and climate community. But for now, I'm Dakota Smith.
And I'm Meredith Fish. See you next week, Up in the Air.